America's military veterans wrote part of our country's history. Join us as we step into their story.
I entered the Army in June of 1965, fresh out of high school. There was a war going on in Vietnam at that time. So my father was career military. He fought in all three wars. World War II with the 101st, Korean War. He was at the Chosin Reservoir. And he was in Vietnam same time I was in '69. I took my basic training at Fort Knox, where my father was stationed at the time. Then from there, they sent me to Fort Polk, Louisiana. Everybody that went to Fort Polk was going to Vietnam. So I did my training there, went through Tiger Land, and then me and a few other guys got held over getting security clearances. They shipped us to Okinawa for about a year, working with the 7th PSYOPs groups, dealing with classified material, guarding it, stuff like that. But right after that, I went to jump school. Then I was shipped to Vietnam. From there, I went to the 1st Cavalry Division in December of '66. Was assigned to Delta Company, 1st and 8th Cav, 1st Cavalry Division. 1st and 8th Cav was an all-airborne battalion. At that time in the 1st Cav, that was the only airborne battalion they had. So when I got to Vietnam, my platoon sergeants told me, well, you're my tunnel rat. I said, what? What's a tunnel rat? He said, when we come across tunnels, you're going to be crawling in them. Oh, gee, thanks a lot, I went through a lot of battles. Didn't get wounded, but went through a lot of battles. I went home. I got assigned to Fort Knox. Well, I had met my wife prior to going to Vietnam, so we got married when I got back. And so I stayed at Fort Knox for a while. Then I went from there to Ranger School. All my friends told me you made a bad mistake. I said, what's that? Why is that? He said, because when you get to Vietnam, they're going to stick you in a Ranger company. I said, well, why not? That's what you're being trained for. Well, I found out in the military, a lot of guys go to school and just get promoted. Don't want to do the job, so I did the job. I went back to Vietnam. When I got there, we had a captain was in F Company Rangers, which is 25th Division. He came down and he saw my records and he said, you've been to Ranger School, so you're gonna volunteer to be a Ranger? I said, yes, sir. That's what I got trained for. So I got sent over to the Ranger Company, called in airstrikes, all that stuff. Went out on missions with 6 men. That's all you went out with, 6 men. And you didn't just walk out. You got inserted by helicopter. Sometimes you did stay behind, which was armored personnel carriers would move into an area, then they would dump you off when they left the area. And you'd stay behind and catch enemy movement. We did a lot of hard training. A team is only good as everybody is. And we trained all the time. But I got wounded in December of '69, on the 7th of December, which I always remember as Pearl Harbor Day. So I got wounded, and I hit what is called a TRICOM claymore. It messed me up pretty good, kept me in the hospital. I went to Camp Zama Hospital there. I did a lot of surgery in Vietnam, and I did a lot of surgery there. Then I was shipped back to Fort Knox, because my wife was originally from Indiana, so she would be close to where I was at. Then I was sent to Fort Bragg to the 82nd Airborne Division. Okay, so I went down there. They put me on light duty because I had 24 wire stitches in my stomach area, and they couldn't put me on jump status, so they put me in light duty. Went back to Vietnam the third time. After I was healed, I went back. I went to the AmeriCal Division, 23rd Infantry Division, and looking at my records, I went right into the Ranger Company. I got wounded again in the arm this time, in my left arm. So then I was on my third time, and it would be my third time wounded. I was sent to Camp Zama, and then from there they sent me to Okinawa. Then they sent me back, this time to Fort Knox again, because my wife, while I was at Fort Knox, waiting, getting healed and all this, then medical hold, I got released from there, and they gave me orders for Fort Hood, Texas. Well, I got here. Fort Hood was all wooden barracks here. It was hot. The barracks were hot. They were hurting for military police. When I got here, it was the 518th Military Police Battalion. And they were deactivating them and bringing the 720th out of Vietnam to Fort Hood. And then I became a road MP at Fort Hood. And what a wild time it was. We used to call it Little New York City because, I mean, you went from call to call to call. I mean, when you went on duty, you already had calls waiting on you. We had a lot to do then. We had riots to deal with, shootings, robberies, chases. So the Army at that time, their policy was they did emergency PCS. And that's what they did to me and my family. They moved me to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, up there. Signed me to the 624th AMP Company. Crime was rampant everywhere in my book. It don't matter, small town, large town, it's criminals are there, you know. So I got levied from there to Korea, and I went to the 728th AMP Battalion in Korea. We got sent, first time was to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, okay, and we practiced constant riot control. That's all our function was, riot control, because they would riot. The Cubans wanted everything. They felt they're in America, you got to give us everything. And that's when the riot started. You know, they started saying this is Castro regime, you know. So we got called in, and then it was Katie barred the door, more or less. We had to beat our way in and roused up the ringleaders and bring them in. Come to find out, a lot of them were KGB. So we had to separate a lot of people, families away from these people and stuff like that. Sergeants are the backbone of the Army. I don't know about nowadays, but they were then the backbone of the Army. Lieutenant will give the orders what he wants done, and we would do it, you know. So at that time is when I told my wife, I said, it's time to retire.
Their service, it's a part of America's history.